I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was going to say, that's exactly what I was thinking. How wonderful to hear young voices.
Good evening, everyone. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Cousins. Here. Councilmember Fisher. Councilmember Knight. Here. Councilmember Michelle.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Tell.
Yeah.
Mayor Kia.
Here. Thank you. Item C tonight is approval of the meeting minutes from our regular city council meeting on January 8th.
I'll move that.
Pardon? Moved by Knight, seconded by Smith. Thank you both. Ms. Knight, anything to note?
No, I didn't see anything else. Thank you.
Other council members, any comments on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes signify by saying aye, please. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you, motion carries. We have prearranged participation this evening from our auditor, Rana Emmons, from PSLZ LLP. Rana, how are you?
Good, thank you.
She is here to present our audit for the fiscal year 2016-2017 that ended on June 30th of 2017.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. And welcome to new members and old new members.
Thank you.
Of council.
Because reminded me, you had to remind me, right?
Old.
Some people don't learn their lesson.
You're right.
But great to be here with you this evening again. It's my pleasure to present to you the city's annual audited financial statements. Everything was filed timely. We're just here for the presentation this evening. I'd like to start off with a few highlights for you. Of course, we'll start with the city did receive an unmodified audit opinion, which is the highest level of audit opinion possible. That's, in layman's terms, a clean audit opinion. I have no exceptions, disclaimers, or anything other than that to report. So big thumbs up there. Let's start off with the general fund highlights, which are actually pretty straightforward this year. There was an increase of $373,000 to the general fund balance. And primarily due to about just one item. In the year before that, we were pretty much break even on the general fund as far as to the fund balance. But in fiscal year 17, you had projected to increase the general fund budget by $230,000, and we came in increasing it by $373,000. That was accomplished by spending $107,000 less than budgeted, and revenue was $35,000 more than budgeted. So primarily on the revenue side of the general fund, state shared revenue increased about 5% this year, which dollar-wise isn't a huge deal, but it is, that's percentage-wise, that's pretty good for the state. Because they've been warning us that the income tax and sales tax collections were down. During the year, that's what they were saying. I haven't heard recently what their projections are yet, but I don't think it's anything that's significant as far as increases in state shared revenue. So we're happy to see any kind of increase, let alone a 5%. But the single biggest thing is really the state reimbursed us for personal property tax revenues that we lost due to this phase out. We're not fully phased out yet, but it's significant because of the smaller businesses are basically phased out at this point. But so the state has come up with this formula to reimburse the local units on what you may be losing, especially for things like if you have public safety millages or debt millages, they really want to make sure that you are covered. Well, their formula, for once, it's in our favor, that it doesn't come out to 100% reimbursement, it comes out to far more than that. So this is not an error. This is how they, even if you call the state, they'll explain it to you, no, this is the way, we have this pot of money, we need to get it out to you, and here you go. So it was significantly more than we had planned. And all communities were pretty much stunned by what the checks that they were receiving. Most of them thought, is this right? Should we send this back? No, please, keep the money when they send it to you. So that pretty much accounted for $400,000 extra revenue, I mean, we did plan for some of it, but it was an additional $400,000 this year of personal property tax revenue. So that definitely helped our bottom line, and that pretty much, you had some significant decreases in attorney fees this year, because you had a lot going on in fiscal year 16. So that helped the bottom line as well. Fire department expenses were up about $90,000 this year, which I know you're all aware of, what they've been asking you for. So, so that's pretty much the general fund in a nutshell. We're up this year, and we'll take it. And I can't tell you if it's going to be up again next year because we don't know the personal property tax. We're assuming. They said don't plan on what you got this year, but it should be still significant. So the major and local street funds, so the gas and weight revenues that the state sends you, pretty much the same, even a slightly bit less than the prior year. So again, it's not enough to really, I mean, it covers your routine maintenance, but it's nothing significant as far as doing major repairs to the roads and things like that. But they are holding their own, those funds. The DDA captured more in property tax revenues, about $16,000 more in property tax revenues, and an additional $8,800 in the personal property tax reimbursement. So they ended up getting more money this year. Happy to report, in 2017, no new debt for the city. We had quite a run with a lot of projects and with refunding. So in fiscal year 16, you actually saved quite a bit of money on you had a couple refunding amounts, and that was nice. But this year we had no activity in the debt. So what we ended up doing, the city paid down about $917,000 principal this year. So that's, of course we'd like to see that. So significant dent in principal payments. The water and sewer funds, tap fees were down about $36,000 over the prior year, so that's 2 years in a row. We had decreases in the tap fees, so that's a direct reflection of people tapping in and development. And the water and sewer operating expenses, I'm not sure how you did it, but it was pretty much dead on to the prior year. So no change in operating expenses for the water and sewer funds. And water and sewer revenues increased $112,000 combined. That's for water and sewer this year. You still are running at an $85,000 operating loss in the water and sewer fund, but you've definitely made progress on that. Of that $85,000 operating loss, that does include over $900,000 of depreciation. So that of course is to be taken into consideration. Pension. I mean, we always like to talk about pension. So couple years, this is the third year of GASB 68, which is that new big kind of pension pronouncement that added pages and pages to the audit. The total, your actual net pension liability, which is the total pension liability minus the assets you have set aside in trust, actually decreased this year. So, rarely, but there are two problems why we decreased. One, you've done a really great job of throwing some extra money at the pension plan. You have contributed everything you're supposed to contribute, 100% of what you're supposed to contribute, plus you contributed an extra $150,000 this year in extra contributions. $155,000 extra this year. And so you've done that very deliberately to try and put a dent in the net pension liability. When you have it, you've made it a priority in your budget and you've put the money aside for it. So that's definitely showing on the bottom line. And the second thing is investment income at MERS. In fiscal year 16, what we were reporting, they had actually not net earnings, but actually net loss that they showed, and they changed the assumptions all pretty much in a negative aspect for the city. So they became more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but definitely not in the right direction for us, but definitely they felt like they were being a little more realistic. And so this year we actually showed net investment earnings in the pension plan. So that really helped to the bottom line this year. You brought down the net pension liability by $500,000 this year. So that's significant, and we love to see that. And that leaves you at about 78% funded on the pension plan. So coming up, next year will be the other post-employment benefit, the post-retiree health care. The new state GASB standard is going to go into effect with your next year's audit. So that's coming up. And this year, every year they throw something new at us. Some years it's major, some years it's minor. This year, it's minor for the city. We have a new disclosure on tax abatements that's required this year, and that's on page 47. It's buried near the end of the footnotes. And what that says is they feel it was important for local units to disclose, and also at the state and county level, they have to do it now too, disclose what tax abatements are out there and how much money is it costing the city or the county or the state that are giving these tax abatements, so that if a taxpayer wanted to see that is disclosed. So for the city, that amounted to about $53,000. So I don't consider that significant and that's just the city's portion of that. So with that, I know you have a big agenda. Happy to answer any questions.
So, speaking of streaks, how many years have you been helping us with our audit in a row?
Maureen, you want to answer?
I think you came on board with probably fiscal year 3-4 would be my guess.
Because it wasn't
Because
2005.
2-3 would have been the first one I did, and I think it was 3-4.
In 5, I think we changed the fiscal year.
Yes.
We're in February fiscal year
It's
now.
almost 15 years.
Okay. Enjoyed every minute.
Is there any practice that we should be doing differently?
Yeah, mine.
Oh, yeah, that's good question. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Yes, so the state, it's either the GASB or somebody's usually just changing it up on us all the time. Us meaning the auditors, the finance directors. I mean, just right after New Year's, the state sends out to all the finance directors and treasurers, we want all this information about your retirement plans and your post-retiree health care plans. Here's a form, figure it out. Oh, we want it by January 31st. So then, and don't forget to read the 6 pages of instructions that detail that. So those are the type of things that are constantly challenging all of us, really, in the financial end of the municipal audit world. Marie does a really nice job of picking up on things. Courtney does as well. It's a lot. I mean, because some of it comes through from the city manager's perspective, some of it's coming through. So really keeping on top of all that, they do a great job. A lot of times we have conversations about these things because they throw them at us just like that. Here we go. All new, this is what we want, and you've got 2 weeks to do it. So, because no one else has anything else to do, of course. It's January, people are doing W-2s and 1099, it goes on and on and on. There's never a slow time for any of us anymore. So I guess encourage your staff and at all levels, keep them up on their training, encourage them to go to different, the state is actually starting to put on classes, if you could believe that, one-day thing, training sessions. And so there's a lot of information that we all have to keep up on, and it's, I guess it's the one thing I don't look backward, definitely looking forward. You do have really good financial information you're getting every month. So, from that aspect, I think that's great as well. I'm not coming in and redoing all your numbers for you when I come in to do the audit. I'm strictly auditing. We do very, very few journal entries. So that I'm very, very pleased with. And again, we talk, Courtney, Maureen, Justin, we talk during the year. We don't wait for, I don't get a call February 10th, oh, by the way, there was this thing on January 31st that I sent in and, when it ran. So that doesn't happen here. They're very much ahead of the curve and on top of things, and it's really important right now.
It's great to hear.
I have one question, perhaps you can, and you may not be able to answer this at all. From an auditing perspective, is it better for the city to have their, say, have a public service millage as opposed to pulling it out of the general fund as we currently do now? Is it a cleaner process? Is it immaterial? Does it benefit you? Does it benefit me?
There shouldn't be a difference, theoretically. Most communities do a separate public safety millage because and especially if they're running their own departments, if they have their own internal police or fire departments.
Okay.
It's easier to be able to tell the police chief, here's your millage, you live within these means. And you have your own fund set aside, it's not operating out of the general fund, it's a dedicated millage, and they know I have whatever it is, $0.5 mil, that's what I have to live within. They can project it, it's easier when it's an internal department, I think, to have a public safety millage. Also, from an administrative standpoint, they feel that it's easier to explain to the voters why they need this extra millage. If you had said extra operating or a higher operating millage versus a dedicated public safety millage, it usually goes over a little better because the residents feel like I know exactly how much is dedicated to public safety. So this is what I'm voting for. So from that aspect, it's those are the pluses of the separate public safety millages. On the other hand, keeping an internal, and of course that's extra bookkeeping for that. So handling it out of the general fund, it simplifies on the accounting side, which, nothing's ever simple, but it's less transferring of, there's all kinds of administration that's a little easier when it's not a separate millage. But as far as dollars go, it shouldn't make a difference. I mean, as far as the, you have contracts and you know about what they should be, and does that answer your question?
Yes, to a certain extent, because it's almost the reverse for the city. We're told by the county sheriff what they're going to charge, and we're told by the area-wide fire department what they're expected to be billing us. So a lot of times, and then I'm not sure our millage will do us any good because the bills are going to come in as they come in based on whatever the county commissioners and the fire board decides.
Although I do have several communities that do have the county sheriff, Oakland County, Washington County Sheriff, that do have dedicated police millages, and and basically they tell their substation sheriff or their sergeant to listen. You got to live within this. Tell me how many officers I get for this.
Right.
And then you go back to the voters if you need additional. Like we need another officer, we can't afford it. You go back to the residents for that.
Right, the sheriff is a set cost per police service unit, I believe it is. So I was just wondering if it was one way it was easier to.
So it really does boil down to those couple things.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining it to the voters, it seems easier with a dedicated millage, and being able to say to whether it's the sheriff or police chief or whoever your internal, external, here's what we have to work with, and we're not going to go beyond that unless it's a special, whether it's a capital item or something like that. But the vehicles, the whatever substation costs in your case, would all have to be paid within that millage. So if it's easier to budget that way, and then that keeps it out of the general fund, and you say, okay, now the general fund only has these activities, has the DPW, has, so that's really the angle you need to look at.
It just allows for true dedication of that amount to that purpose. All right, thank you.
And you can't, you can't touch that for anything other than
Correct.
the stated purpose on the ballot.
Other questions from Ms. Evans?
Well, one for staff. This came in the confidential envelope, but is this available on the website?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Cousins?
Couple questions. You said we had it was a $917,000 payment of principal, down as principal? Where do I
Yes.
find that here in this?
If you go to pages, the easiest place to look is within the footnotes, and that would be page 34 and 35. There's a table for the government and DDA debt, and the next page is the water and sewer debt.
34 and 35. Thank you very much for that answer. And the next question was, when you talked about the personal property refund we got from the state, we've had two of those so far, one last year and one this year. Is that correct? And this year's doesn't reflect in this budget. It's just, it was last year's, correct? That reflects in the budget. And this year I know it was over 400,000. What was it last year? What was that amount last year? Do you have a?
It was
When you
585.
Yeah, it was about that.
It was like 585 and we budgeted around 140-ish.
Yeah.
585?
That included, I mean, that's not all just general, that would be general
Roads.
and roads and geobond.
Right.
So that was.
Somewhere in there.
Okay. And this year was over 400, and do you remember what we budgeted this year for?
I know it was 140 in general
Yeah.
fund, I don't remember overall, but that's in the budget amendment,
Okay.
actually.
And when did we increase the millage rate for the half a mil? Was that just for this year?
The half a mil was last year to fund the fire, was this audit to fund the fire capital. Then this year we added the GO bond of 0.6 into this 17-18 year.
So we've had that millage increase for 2 years?
The 0.5 for capital for fire, yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's 100,000 that goes to
Okay.
the fire capital.
Okay.
And you'll, I'm sorry, and you'll find that in the equipment replacement fund?
We transferred it.
We transferred the 100,000 into that fund.
Okay. So I'll ask the question I always ask Marie, and she usually has the answer right away. And that is, if I'm looking on page 51, the fund balance there, I saw your 373,000 that you had there, and the fund balance on July 1 was $1,771,196. The fund balance in June 30, the difference there, explain the difference to me, the $1,071,000 and the $1,444,000. You see what I'm talking about?
I do see it, it's the revenues minus the expenditures.
Okay.
So that's the
Okay.
net increase of the general.
Of that difference, okay. So, my question that I was asked Marie is, what is the fund balance as a percentage of our total revenues?
Yeah, do you have?
Marie's always has the answer.
Yeah, you know, off the top of my head, Paul, I'm thinking it's somewhere near 30 some odd percent.
My calculation is right, it's 32.5%.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, thank you.
And some of that, the council does have plans for.
The what?
You do have plans for
I get
about
that.
$500,000 of that, 537,000
I get that, okay.
for
And,
facilities.
and most units of government have 15% as a magic number that they have.
Not anymore. You know, the rule of thumb used to be it's about 20%. Because,
Maybe municipals are different than schools, but not that much different.
so the rule of thumb used to be, if you ask pretty much any CPA back at, 10 years ago, was that could the city operate, how long could the city operate if your resources were cut off?
Lost everything.
State shared revenue, no more property
Right,
taxes
right.
for whatever reason. And so 3 to 6 months was the general rule. So that's, your percentage of actually they look at total, whatever way you want to look at it, total revenues or total expenditures of the general fund versus your fund balance. But that's really what they were trying to accomplish. In the downturn, 2008, 9, 10, all those rules kind of went out the window. And I would say most all my communities feel more comfortable with more in their fund balance and not less. They're more toward the 30% and not the 15 anymore. Because, and it really depends on if you have any significant capital plans in let's say the next 5 years. That would lead you to want to have more in your general fund balance if you have immediate significant plans for the money. So most everybody is in, and I'm talking southeastern Michigan, it's they're sleeping better at night with more in their fund balance than less.
And part of that's because there's been a fairly decent increase in house values, which increases the tax.
But that's been gradual, it's been very
Yeah, but
gradual, it's
still.
very slight from year to year. I mean, I don't have anybody that's, a 5% increase in your taxable value is huge
Yeah.
for any community.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I bet if you added up restricted and unrestricted, it's far higher than 32%.
Oh, it is, no. But it's unrestricted, it's 32.5%.
Other questions? Okay, I'll say thank you on behalf of council for your good work.
Thank you very much. Always appreciate your support.
At this time, is there a motion?
I would do that. I would accept the audit for year ending June 30th, 2017.
Motion by Fisher,
Second.
second by Michelle. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the vote to accept the audit for year ending June 30th, 2017.
Michelle.
Yes.
Knight. Yes. Smith.
Yes.
Tell.
Yes.
Fisher. Yes. Cousins.
Yes?
Keo.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and help. Item E is approval of the agenda. And I know that there is an updated J3 resolution on the table. Given the special guests we have here from the fourth grade, I was wondering if somebody might want to move item L1 up on the agenda somewhere. So if somebody's ready to maybe do that, maybe.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to add the updated J3 resolution. And that was mainly just to get it in resolution format, the content that was changed. And move the new business item L1 to after G non-arranged.
I'll second.
Motion by Smith, thank you, second by Fisher.
I'm sorry, what are you doing, moving L1 to E1, E2?
Right after G.
J?
G.
All right.
Okay, we have a motion there, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda as revised, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? Very good. We have no public hearings this evening, so we're down to non-arranged participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak this evening on any topic? Okay, then we are now at L1, which is consideration of the recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Commission and Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee to approve the installation of a sign honoring Frederick Cullum. And normally we have a motion before we discuss anything, but I think we have a presentation, Justin, is that correct?
We do have a presentation.
I'll let you lead this then, please.
Yep, I'm gonna try and keep this short, so that way I can leave the kids to do their thing. Before you, you have an item that requires that you approve the installation of a commercial sign honoring Frederick Cullum. The city was approached by one of the teachers at Wiley Elementary with the concept of an interpretive sign honoring Mr. Cullum a few months ago. Since that time, some students from Wiley Elementary came to the Parks and Recreation Commission to present the concept of the sign. And the Parks and Recreation Commission was supportive of the sign and made a recommendation to City Council to install the sign in a location in Mill Creek Park near the Marathon Station, just off of the Circular Station. And then the students then came to the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee and gave a similar presentation. And the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee considered the text and layout of the sign and again made a recommendation to City Council to approve the sign. So I'm going to turn things over to Laura Armbruster and students from Wiley Elementary's 4th grade.
Actually, Deb Ebert.
Oh, and
she's here.
Debbie Ebert. So if you guys want to stand in front of the podium.
up here and take them this way if you want.
We will present a group of fourth graders from Riley Elementary School. I am Aiden Wilson. I'm Charlotte Olive. I'm Madison Brown. I'm Daniel Sherman. I'm Eva Patrico. I'm Avalon Hyatt. We are here to give you information about Frederick Hyatt, the designer of the Screw Arch Bridge in Mill and the Mill Creek Bridge in Dexter. We learned about him and thought that others may want to learn about him too. We are asking you to approve our idea of having a sign placed in Dexter to honor him and his accomplishments. We've already met with Dexter Parks and Recreation Committee and Dexter Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee, and they have approved our idea. They gave us some ways to improve the sign before coming to the City Council meeting. Here is our revised sign. In 1887, Martha Warner was killed crossing the train tracks. The citizens of Dexter petitioned the Michigan Central Railroad to make the road crossing safer. Frederick Helm was assigned the job. Frederick was born on November 7, 1864. He attended school in Detroit. In 1887, he became the first African American to receive an engineering degree from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and was hired as a civil engineer for the Michigan Central Railroad Company. He is known for the design and construction of 20 railroad bridges. In 1890, he designed the Skew Arch Bridge in Dexter, as well as the Surrey Bridge over Mill Creek. Frederick Helm died of acute pneumonia on February 6, 1895, at the age of 30. On December 20th, our classes had a fundraising kickoff reception. People from our community have pledged $1,750, and other individuals have pledged to help us complete the cost when and if we need it. The mayor of Dexter came and cut the reception cake, which was donated by Dexter Bakery. Our classes are learning many things about bridges, Dexter history, and civic engagement. We are asking City Council to approve our idea of placing the sign to honor Frederick Helm. It is our hope to be able to place the sign at the end of this school year. We would like to have a community celebration at the time of dedication of the sign. We even found some of Mr. Helm's relatives in our research and would like to invite them to attend as well. Thank you for your time and consideration.
May I ask a question? Can you tell me what the sign will be made of? Will it be wood or metal?
It would be the usual sign
That we have around town already? Okay.
So the sign design will be similar to that of some of the other interpretive signs in Mill Creek Park, such as the fish sign.
Okay. And what did you think was most interesting about Mr. Helm in your research on him? Just kick it out.
I would say that how he made to get the job of becoming the designer of the bridge, because back then it was really hard for African Americans to get jobs like that.
Very good. Thank you.
Now you have me thinking on what you learned. You said that there were other bridges that you did. Are they the type of bridge, our bridge, that looks like our bridge?
Are they skew bridges?
There's only one skew bridge, and then he built like the rest of them the same.
Where, do you know where that one is?
The skew bridge, I think it's like Jefferson.
Okay, the viaduct.
Okay, thank you.
There's another bridge too,
Yeah.
as you walk through the
Park.
Oh, yes, but I meant not other than the ones here, yeah.
And why was it skew?
Because it didn't have any right angles.
It's at an angle.
Oh, I see. Did he build any other bridges in Michigan?
We don't know. He built the Mill Creek, and that's
Okay.
what we know.
I'll quit bugging you.
Mr. Cousins? Did your teacher graduate from Dexter Schools too?
I don't really know.
Yeah.
Almost.
I know.
Very good.
Very good. That's a very nice presentation. Thank you for coming today.
I have a question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
5th grade, so.
Probably hope that the sign will probably have yes or the answer, sort of. So in 5th grade or before that, we could sort of have a ceremony or celebrate it.
Have you been able to contact any of his relatives?
Yes.
And have you gotten a response from them?
So, I can jump in on that. Made it from the other meeting.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to get in front of the camera. What's going on?
Tell them who you are, Jeff.
Oh, I'm Jeff Dagg. I'm one of the teachers that was working with the students on the project. We just came from the school board meeting where another group of our students was presenting their work. So, I forgot what I was answering now. Oh, relatives. So, a person at the University of Michigan, School of Engineering, actually knows the family, and Fred's brother's grandson is the contact. So we haven't actually spoken in person yet, but we do have the connection, and once something happens, then we'll pursue the contact more.
Very good.
Before we go, there's one student in the back from our, came for support, that's Annika. So, thank you very much.
Hi, Annika.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So which council member would like to make this motion?
I think I would.
Hey, I want to do it.
I think it's appropriate that the
Second
people get
motion
stuff
by
right.
Ms. Fisher, second by Ms. Slade, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Well,
Any discussion by council? Seeing none, please call the vote.
Tell,
yes.
Cousins,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Knight, Keel.
Yes.
Did you move on to the next round?
Thank you very much for all your good work. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But I'm sure you have homework.
Go White.
Okay, so. All right, so next up on our agenda is communication. Or two standard communications in the packet.
We only get one shot.
Does anybody have any comments on this? I will let you know that the Watts policy meetings are at 1 o'clock. That's where I actually missed my first meeting, so I apologize. It's the 17th, but I'll get there to the early.
I will be attending my first wave meeting tomorrow.
Very good, thank you.
Schedule another work session.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You want to do it on the first meeting, second meeting, whatever?
Which meeting is not going to be coming to the end for a work session before? You know, first or second meeting in February? Well, it will be the first meeting because we have an extra week, so it's pushed back. We had talked about having an update on that. Yeah, on the headworks and surgery treatment, on the 50% is already. I mean, I guess I can rather get that one done if they're ready.
Check it out.
Do it on the second.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Just choose whichever one. So we get it on the schedule.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little one.
You're not here the second meeting?
Okay, I'm going to move on to our first report tonight from our finance director, Marie. Tell us how much money we have.
We have lots. When I say here, I thought the crowd was, here to hear the financial report. It's not.
I'm sure they usually are.
I think they heard it.
You have the written report in front of you. I don't really have a whole lot of updates to it. Raina did mention the report, the pension report, OPEB report that the state is requiring. It has been completed. I gave it to her to kind of give it a look-see just because it's so new. Then in future years, that will be due with the rest of our reports at the end of December. And then that's really about it. The state, I went to a training on Friday, well, Thursday afternoon and Friday, and the state treasury department is really, I think, working hard to try to streamline some of the things that they do. They have, they've introduced some new forms. I'm not gonna go into the details of it, but I'm impressed that they are listening to the local units and trying to make decisions to implement some of the laws that are being passed in a way that, if not necessarily the easiest for us, that doesn't make us pull our hair out, if that makes any sense. And I think they're on their website, they are enhancing things quite a bit. There's a lot more information that you can find on their website now. So I don't know what caused this or what kind of change in leadership caused it or where this came from, but I think it's a forward movement on behalf of Treasury. I just wish MDOT.
Yeah.
So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Right?
Any areas of concern we should be made aware of?
No, not really. We, the only thing, and I think Courtney might have mentioned it a little bit in her budget amendment discussions, the extra money that came from the personal property tax in the, that's in the GO bond fund for that. We need to keep that fund open until we get that Dexter Wellness settled. We always think of Dexter Wellness as a DDA issue, but the DDA does not capture that millage.
Right.
So that's still gonna be hanging out there until we get closure on that. But that's really the only kind of unusual thing that's going on.
Thank you.
Other questions from Marie? You want to say anything about the investment, meter investments?
Oh, sure.
Or make any comments from that?
Yeah, actually, at my conference in the fall, I met a gentleman who works with a company called Meter Investments. They are largely an Ohio company that is moving into Michigan. They do investment consulting. That's different from, and Shauna had mentioned we had a finance committee meeting. This is why I wanted to kind of run it by finance. And then we pulled in Mike from the DDA, Mike Fitzpatrick from the DDA, and met again with Mr. Clark from Meter. Basically what they do is they offer investment consulting, and why I'm interested in it now more than I was before is the interest rates are moving, and they're moving in a direction where we can finally maybe get something from them. And from a time and expertise perspective, I mean, I can do an adequate job, but I think they could do better. The proposal that they've put in front of us that we haven't really completely vetted yet, but I mean, it's a pretty substantial difference, more than enough to pay their consulting fees. They would act in a fiduciary manner, so unlike my broker, for instance, my broker will say, I've got these, available, but they don't advise, they're not an advisory, it's up to me to make the decision. Whereas in this case, they would be our fiduciary, where they work for us, not for the bank or the broker or that sort of thing. So I'm very intrigued by it. And so we need to, I guess, have one more discussion amongst the finance committee before we brought it back. John, I did talk to Mike about it, about the information that was sent, and he was pleased with it. So anyway, that's kind of where we are with that. I'll bring something back to you at a future date.
Any other questions from Marie? Thanks for the good report.
Oh, I will say, I mentioned to some of the ladies, this training I went to had a session on active shooter situations. Shooter situations, and that was a very uncomfortable session to go to. But it really makes you, especially in light of like the facilities discussions that we were having, it makes you think about, anyway, it makes you think.
Well, secure lobbies,
Yeah.
cameras,
Yep.
outside surveillance.
Thank you, Bree. Next up is Dan with our public services report.
Good evening, everybody. Got a 2-week report. I don't have a lot of updates today, so if you have any questions on my report.
I think they're calling in questions
They're
from
calling
home.
We're live on TV, right?
Don't have any questions for you, Dan.
Okay.
I have one.
Yep, great.
Was the damage done to our well out at the high school all repaired, the
Yes,
fence?
everything, yes, the fence is repaired, we abandoned the well, everything's taken care of, we got the results back, we had the well back in service last week, so everything's back up.
Zach?
Do we have an idea what caused the main break?
Usually with the frost, my opinion, my professional opinion, usually with the frost, you have a crack that goes around, all the way around the pipe. This one had failed on top, like 3 feet. So we had to replace a 3-foot piece, which is concerning to me. But we know the 2nd Street is one of the last streets we have remaining in the city of Dexter that doesn't have 15 to 16-year-old, water main, new water main. So it's on a radar for something in the future. But yeah, the way that it broke, the whole top broke out, probably 4 or 5 inches across, almost 3 feet long.
That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did that, I can't even imagine how the earth shifted like that.
I'm not.
Did it
yeah.
freeze?
I know, it did not freeze. We had something similar that happened on 5th Street, but we replaced that many years ago on the same situation.
Sounds like a structural failure.
Yes.
It only happened because Paul asked about it.
I know, I was wondering, I wanted to ask a question.
Well, I had the city of
Bragging
Chelsea.
about how good we were doing.
I had the city of Chelsea call me, the director over there asked me, because they've had quite a few water breaks right before I was getting ready to leave, so I gotta call him back tomorrow. Thanks.
I got one.
Yeah. So other than that, the repair was made, the bacteria, obviously we have boil water on 3 streets. We got that out, and we walked house to house to let everybody know what to do, and the repair's made. We have the whole temporary filled with bubblegum asphalt. So it's made, everybody's back in business. Back-T samples came back good.
Did the water leak at the plant cause the generator battery failure?
No, the battery generator, it was a charger that failed on the battery, yep. So we got that fixed.
Oh, it charges that, all right.
How's our water system asset management plan coming?
It's come along great. Tim had a meeting a couple weeks ago, Tim Stewart, our lead operator for the water, with Patrick, and I don't know who else was there, and we gathered all of our information off the DEQ website that we needed for the additional information for the asphalt water. I do believe we have another meeting this week. I can't remember, it's Wednesday. Wednesday. To go over the information that we gave to OHM and see what else we need to do. We went through all our assets, and we have associated them with where they are as far as criteria of failure. So we went through quite a bit of work. Now we just got have one more meeting, I think, or 2 more meetings with OHM to put the package together so we can get that.
Our DEQ records changed again, so they are out trying to hire someone.
Great.
How's my buddy Nubco doing?
Really good.
Are they?
I mean, from the results that we're getting, yeah.
Are they on top of it, or?
They're really coming in with some good numbers. I think that we'll be able to, we're gonna have a utilities committee meeting to go over some of that stuff. But the numbers are great, and the plant's been operating really well.
Can you elaborate on the, where is it, pilot building, water leak in pilot building, that was just internal, or was that?
Yeah, it was internal.
Faith in action or something?
I guess the heat got shut off or something, and something froze in the inside of the building, so we're working through that process right now. There's still a little bit of a leak, but not much, not like it was before when they originally called. It's a draft right now.
Julie?
It says you've worked on pulling well number 1, estimate for council approval. Will you remind me again where well number 1 is?
Well, number 1 is behind bushes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And then that's later in the packet of the discussion.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember, but a month ago I brought in where we were at with all of the different
Yes.
repairs and preventative maintenance that we've done on the other previous wells to show you why we were going to number 1 this time with maintenance on it.
Thank you.
Anything else? I think we're good, sir. Thank you very much. Next up is our Community Development Manager. Michelle, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Very good.
How's the rest of council?
Good. Here.
Excellent. You can tell I'm feeling better. So you have my report in front of you. Before I go into any updates, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Has anybody used the home program here?
That's my question.
No, nobody's used the home program.
Okay, so
here.
that's, okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
But I want you to know, at some point, because we are in the program, that could be something that gets used here. So, and we will be updating the website. I'm working with Justin, creating a page under community development where we can add information that will be applicable to our residents. Things like winterization and what I call minor home repair. They have a different term for it, but it's those emergency type services for people, you know, maybe their water heater goes out or they get a roof leak. It's things like that for the low and moderate income people.
And then my second question, maybe it's related to the ZBA decision. What did, I realized that they turned it down, the applicant's request. They just didn't want to exacerbate the existing problem?
They did not feel that it met the criteria, specifically the practical difficulty.
Okay.
Being that he had a very long, deep yard that wasn't encumbered by any other buildings, plus the ability to come in from the alley, which is adjacent to the rear of the property. They felt there were other ways to be able to provide a storage area on site that would meet the zoning ordinance. The expansion of the garage that he was proposing wasn't for a vehicle, it was for storage.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Paul, did you have a question?
Okay, so my updates for you, under the Planning Commission updates with the Encore Theater, now that the Planning Commission has determined that temporary employment housing would be compatible with uses currently in the Village Residential District, and that it needs to be a special use, Encore Theater will be, based on my conversation with them, coming in and submitting an application hopefully this week. Whether it's this week or next week, that would be in time for the March Planning Commission meeting.
Is that the time they'll consider the text amendment?
I'm sorry?
Well, would that be at the same meeting they consider the text amendment?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up because that's something I wanted to talk with you about. The text amendment, previously, and the way I explain it to people is that the section 307, if Planning Commission rules in your favor, that triggers a text amendment. Does the city want to initiate the text amendment themselves, or do you want the Encore Theater to cover those costs?
I mean, in the past, we've had the applicants do that, right?
Actually, from what I can gather, text amendments were not done. So, other than the one that we did with Northern United for the manufacturing and the tasting room expansion, that was passed through, if I remember right. But all other ones prior to me being here, there were no text amendments that were ever done.
All right, so then the Northern United one was covered by Northern United.
I believe so. I'd have to go back and look at the stuff.
I think if we would ask one applicant to cover the amendment, that the with fairness, to ask the next one to cover it.
How much are we talking
It would be an estimate. It would be the cost for the attorney to look at the amendment as well as the planning consultant. It's something that I would write up, but with their review and comment. It could be a couple $100. It would be less than $500 most likely for the planner, but it could be upwards up to $1,500 or more on the city attorney.
I just want to remind you that that's a nonprofit organization. It's not like Northern United at all. It does amazing things for the community, both for the businesses that are contiguous and that service that before their functions, and then to raise, let's throw a figure out of $2,000, that's a considerable amount. I think we get benefit from them. And I guess the question I could ask is the manager, would it be a burden of $2,000 without any discussion about previous groups being a nonprofit on the city budget?
Well, I think we need to look back and see if we actually charged Northern United for that, because I think potentially because we hadn't really been in the habit of doing text amendments along with those, there was a chance it wasn't done that way, so I think we need to look at that, but I mean, if council wants to pass different fees for different people in the community and different organizations, we can do that, but there's a fee for that, so, we can set our fees differently, but let us check to see if that's even an issue.
Yes, let's consider the options of profitable group and a non-profit group and what the benefit is to the community.
Well, I have a couple of competing conversations in my head about this right now. So one is the equal treatment before law. I don't care if it's Anheuser-Busch or the Girl Scouts, we ought to treat everyone the same. However, as I look at this, and correct me if my interpretation is wrong, this is basically a codification of an interpretation the Planning Commission made.
Correct.
That's kind of a housekeeping thing where ZBA's made a decision, the Planning Commission's made a decision that this is what the zoning ordinance ought to be. And so generally, I feel when we do those, when we codify decisions we've made on our own work, that ought to be something that we do as part of a regular annual update. Not necessarily every time everyone comes in, we're changing and activating everything, but at the end of the year, we've got a list of these things and we kind of roll it all through at once. I don't know if that helps any, but those are the voices in my head.
I think that's probably how it was handled with Northern United, that it was thought of as more like not just Northern United coming in asking for a text amendment.
Right.
They paid to get a special land, or to get the 307, and because of that it generated the text amendment. So I think that is generally how we handled it more. But saving them up for some point in time is an interesting idea too, because, it's cheaper to have them review everything that occurred, in a 12-month period at the same time.
You're not hitting print all the time on zoning ordinance.
Okay. I'm meeting with Patrick on Wednesday, and then Dan and his team on Thursday. We're going to go over the CIP, because that's coming to the Planning Commission for their first look at it in March. The Planning Commission is also going to look at draft chapters that Carlisle Wortman has done on background data, the demographics, things like that, and then transportation. And one of the things we're going to be looking at is, do we continue to call transportation, or do we now refer to it as mobility? So those are discussions that we'll be having with the Planning Commission. And then the last one is Grandview Commons update. I did talk with Steve today, kind of get an idea of where we are with Grandview Commons. He's telling me that the financing is a process. So one of the things I'll have to do between now and April is do an update letter to MISHDA, because remember, we had 3 years to have a completed project done. We've got approval for a project, we've got a couple others in the hopper, but I'm going to have to ask them for some additional time. I don't think that that's going to be a problem, but I just think you should know. That's it, unless there's any other questions. Did you, do you have any heartburn or questions, comments regarding the redevelopment ready communities memorandum of understanding?
There was a lot of
Tell me
money
how you
for,
really feel about that, John. 'cause it's all over the
How do I use, I could give a rat's.
No, I think many communities are in that same opinion right now, so, okay.
So this will be on the next agenda then? Deb?
That'll be on the next agenda. All right, thank you.
The only other thing, Michelle,
Oh,
real
I'm
quick,
sorry.
was the proclamation congratulating Jolly Pumpkins.
Oh.
We haven't done those before, and I guess we just needed a little bit of feedback on whether that's something council wants us to start doing or not doing, and does that need to come to you guys? Is it something we, you know,
Since the
we haven't really.
chamber doesn't do them?
Right, I mean, you know, we can do that, we find articles in the paper about companies
All
having
the time.
accomplishments, you
Right.
know, should we be sending them something that, you know, honors that and shows support of the city?
Isn't this true in terms of operations, is that Sean can proclaim anything he wants? If it's a resolution, then it comes to the council, and council
Right, we've done
endorses
it
that.
both.
But he can, Sean can draft something in on behalf of us and anytime, I think that's legal to do it.
Right, we've done it both ways, you know, some things we've done by consent agenda, some things.
I was just thinking in terms of the timing of things.
Right, so, as long as everyone's comfortable with that, you know, we can do it that way, and I think it would be a nice thing to do when we see those articles about, you know, somebody getting some recognition.
yeah, I think you should give them a little recognition, maybe even mention it on our Facebook or whatever we got.
Yeah.
But it gives, it's a way to celebrate. If it doesn't take up too much staff time to prepare it, perhaps it's even something that's done as part of the consent agenda.
Just for, you mean, just so people can see it, or it could
Yeah.
be like provided in a report, or, you know, something where it's in the packet somewhere.
And it's something that the papers can write about, official action.
How would somebody like We Love Dexter know that?
How would they
Read the
know?
packet here?
Um,
Because they have become much more active more recently with their,
Right, I think they do look at our packet. They also get the city's email blast, if I'm not mistaken. We can also, as just staff, send the information to them. so.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, there's a written report from our National County Sheriff. Any comments on the council on that?
I had a question on that, but he's not here to answer it, so. What are all these numbers on the crash information? Does that mean there were 6 cars involved in that crash, or 2 cars, or
There's 6 accidents?
6
that
accidents?
what
I
Yeah,
think that's the
that's
number
what
of
I think.
accidents.
I think it means there's more than one accident. That one.
Got it. Thank you.
7 trucks stuck under the viaduct.
Yep.
I think after the first 2, they
That's just,
stopped channel.
how do they give these guys license?
I don't know.
How do they give them licenses? Number 1 rule of truck is know your overhead.
The good news is that the suspicious activity is down 18%.
Well, I mean, 18% less.
Yeah. Okay. If you do have questions, you can always get in touch with Courtney or Mr. Fox. He's pretty accessible if you call. I always think to do that. I don't believe we have any subcommittee reports at this time. So I'm going to move on to city manager report.
On the illegal dumping that I wrote about, we did receive a check from the company for $1,100 in payment for the Metro sewer bill and staff time related to that really ridiculous incident. So that was good.
Did they
They paid
explain
that
why
very
they did
quick.
it?
No, they just sent the check. We called and talked to them, but they just felt like it was environmentally friendly chemicals, so it shouldn't matter where they dump it, but it's not environmentally friendly grease. And why they put it right down the staircase is completely beyond any of us, so. That's not a company that works here, they're all the way from Grand Rapids, so, I was surprised actually that they sent the check that quickly, but
Well,
they did.
they were $1,100 under bid.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very odd. The letter from St. James about the additional handicap spaces being added to Broad, I did ask OHM to look at that to see if there was any reason why that would be a concern, but, I don't know that that's an unreasonable request. I didn't realize until I looked at the aerial that they don't have any, they don't even have a parking lot, it's all on-street parking for their whole facility, which I thought was
They used to
interesting.
try to come up the alley.
Yeah, I mean, there's one like sort of behind, but yeah, there's no public, or there's no parking lot for that church at all.
That's where they used to, I believe that where they used to try to drop off the handicap
And I
to the back.
don't know that it would really affect anybody else to have a couple more handicap spots there, because there's not really a business close by that would also use that parking lot thing, so.
Why
It's pretty
do they use-
underutilized
Oh, it
parking.
would just save the spaces in front of it.
They'd still be public, it would just be, they would be handicapped.
Can't they just get there earlier?
Patrick?
I did speak with our traffic engineer on that topic. Anytime we do something like that, we want to figure out if there's any minimums or maximums that we're, should be aware of. As we looked into, I'm not surprised, there's no maximum, but generally they try to say, if you're doing public parking, you should at least provide one per block. I think currently there's 2 there right now. The only difference is we would be, if they want additional spaces, we would provide those, but we would also have to provide space for van accessible loading. So if they wanted to, it would probably take more or less 3 spaces in that situation, so.
And we could maybe add 1 instead of 2,
Yeah.
and just, or, restrike. Well,
Is the curb cut so they can get out of the van and get over the curb and
Yes.
get on the sidewalk?
And there are some potential, there's an existing curb cut now adjacent to some barrier-free spaces. It looks like there may be some, technically you should have technical warnings at that interface between the, where you're bringing them out into the right of way. So there's a couple things that, in addition to just paint.
The other thing I wanted to draw attention to was the Baker Road paving, and that it's our current plan to stop short of Grand Street, because we don't really want Grandview Commons cutting into Baker to run their water line a month after. We don't know when they're gonna do that work, and so it would not make sense to pave it and then have it cut into almost immediately, so we'll stop, short of where Grandview will need to. We were already gonna stop at Grand anyway, so, wanted to point that out. The other things, the Dexter and Arbor Road's gonna be repaint, crush and shaped by the road commission from Z Road to into town.
Oh, good.
They're gonna do that as soon as the weather breaks, likely in April, before the roundabout construction starts. So they'll be having a public meeting on that in February or March. Once they set that date, I'll let everybody know.
And it's completely paving?
It's a crush and shape until they get to the city limit, and then because it's curved in the city, it'll be mill and overlaid to Dan Hoy. Because the road commission still owns the Dan Hoy.
Yep.
The road commission did bring up potentially turning that segment from the city limit to Dan Hoy over to the city once it was mill and overlaid. So that would be something we consider taking on that stretch to Dexter Crossing. You know, having to just stop at the city line. The utility committee is gonna meet Thursday, as Dan mentioned, talking about NOVCO and trying to finalize the water and sewer ordinance we've been working on for a while. I did get a phone call from Alex Wallace about him potentially looking into, and I'd mentioned this before, developing the property next to the A&W, which is currently in Sauer Township. He's talking about, what to do if he needs water and sewer connection. That property is not covered under one of the agreements like the A&W was, where they could come in, get sewer service without coming into the city. That property owner at the time didn't sign an easement to that effect, so it would have to come into the city. So I explained to him that he needs to talk to SIO about that, send a letter to us, send a letter to SIO. We haven't received that yet, but
Is A&W in the city?
no.
Wouldn't they create an island?
So Alex Wallace owns the A&W, so he would do that and probably connect it with 8180. So, right. He owns the property, right, he's not a part of the business anymore. We also got a call, Dan got a call from the Zingerman, from Corman Farms about potentially wanting to tie into the water system. I don't know that that would be very feasible, but that call came in today, so I'll talk to that person tomorrow.
Where would that even come from? That would have to come
I
from.
mean, I guess it would come from Sears
It's
technically.
across the street.
Yeah, it's across the street, and
And
it's
it's also in
mile
a
down.
completely different township that we have no 425 agreement with, so.
That's Dexter Town.
Yeah,
Is that
Dexter
Dexter?
Township. Yeah, don't tell them that.
Close my eyes.
Right.
It's either Dexter or Webster, I can't remember.
The Border to Border Trail, they're having a public meeting on the segment from Jeeve to Wagner on Thursday, February 1st at the library at 6:30. Found that out, Justin found that out from We Love Dexter site, so, that piece they have TAP grant funding for, the Jeeve to Wagner segment. Dr. Tivis and I are gonna meet for lunch on Monday, just to kind of catch up on things. He was out on vacation and then sick, so he's just looking to kind of get caught up on where things are at, so we're gonna do that next Monday.
On a variety of things?
Variety of things, yeah.
Can I throw one out that I got a call from the school about?
Okay.
And that was the issue that relates to recycling and the,
Yeah, Justin's gonna talk about that right now.
okay,
That's the last thing on my list, Paul.
thank you.
Yeah.
So, Dexter Schools was approached by Washtenaw County, that Washtenaw County has a recycling program that they offer to all public school systems within the county. It would provide free recycling. The county sent Dexter Schools a contract to sign, and a representative of the schools contacted the city, wondering, is this something that we can do? Well, the refuse ordinance puts us in the driver's seat in terms of contracting for refuse and recycle. So I met with representatives of Waste Management and the Dexter Schools last week to kind of talk this through. And basically what Waste Management said is that because of the type of service that Dexter Schools would be getting through this program, they would be willing to waive any claims they have with regard to the contract over that type of service. And specifically the type of services that they would be getting is between 80 and 100 or more curb carts for recycling, stationing them inside the schools, and then either swapping out or dragging them all out to the curb to be serviced on a regular basis. Waste Management didn't have an interest in providing that service, and especially couldn't provide that service at the price that Washtenaw County is offering, which is free. So what we wanted to do is bring that to City Council and ask if that's something that you'd be interested in allowing us to explore, is potentially contracting or signing a contract or a three-way contract with Washtenaw County to provide free recycle to the schools.
Paul, they're doing this now though, right? This is not a new request, they're actually doing it right now, correct?
So apparently it had been going on for a while at one school. They want to expand that program to all of their schools.
That's the information I got. It was already being done in one school, and I don't know if it's a pilot program, but now it's being, they want to expand to other schools.
So and we were actually unaware that it was taking place until one of the contractors for this program put a large dumpster in front of one of Waste Management's dumpsters, and Waste Management gave us a call and said, hey, what's with this dumpster? It turns out that they were going to try and take over the cardboard dumpster piece, which Waste Management does offer and is interested in keeping in-house.
Julie?
What contractor does Washtenaw County use for that recycling service?
So they use a combination of Ann Arbor Recycle and Advanced Disposal. It seems like for the curb cart piece, it would be Ann Arbor Recycle. whereas the larger containers, which it is the reason that this kind of came to our attention, is advanced disposal. And basically, Waste Management's primary concern is having a direct competitor come into the city that they are contracted to service. But they don't feel that type of stress with Ann Arbor Recycle for this specific type of service.
So this service would be mainly curb carts?
So the way that it sounds like the process would work is this program would provide as many curb carts as the schools need to put inside the schools, and then also service at the curb. And during our meeting, they brought up that it might be, you might only need 8 for Wiley, but you might need 15 to 20 for the high school. And if you're doing this throughout all of the schools, that adds up to quite a lot.
What day would they be picking up?
I didn't get that detail, but that's one of the things that we'd have to talk about with if we can go forward with this.
So they're not doing cardboard, they do what, plastic bottles?
Mixed
Paper.
recycling.
Yeah, paper, anything you can.
Anything paper.
Anything that'll fit in the curbside?
Right, so any type of recycle that you would get as a resident could go into these bins that would then be picked up by Ann Arbor Recycle.
The Waste Management wants to retain the cardboard.
The cardboard dumpsters.
They have dumpsters specifically for cardboard. And it's not mixed, it's strictly cardboard.
Correct.
So our county taxes are paying for this then?
Correct.
Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. And from my understanding, this is a program that's implemented in a number of other Washtenaw County school districts.
I don't understand the benefit to the school or in Washtenaw County.
Well, the benefit to the school is that they get free recycle and an educational piece that goes along with that recycling inside the school.
That's the benefit, is the educational part, the kids to recycle more. That's been working evidently with this one school that they've had it. And
Basically, the goal is to teach kids to recycle.
As long as it don't hurt you monetarily, I'm all for it.
So if Waste Management decides that they wanted to do that, would the contract we would have supersede the one of the county?
So that would be the piece of it that we need to talk through is modifying the contract that was provided from the county to the schools to make it from the county to the city, have Waste Management sign off on the fact that they are willing to forego that piece of it, and then potentially have the schools sign on as an additional signer.
And we talked about just doing it until, we could only guarantee it through the point of the existing waste management contract, because if we bid it, if we decided to put it out to bid, it could be that a next provider isn't interested in continuing that. And I mean, the ordinance does call for a single water system in the city, so it would go at least through the waste management contract, which I think is March of 2019.
Right.
that contract's how long?
March of 2019.
2019?
And then it's a 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
Does Waste Management currently provide mixed-use recycling to the schools?
No, only cardboard.
Only cardboard.
Right.
So they're just
They
waiting
don't
what-
provide commercial mixed-use recycling except for through curb cards.
Correct.
But they don't provide those to the schools at this time.
Okay.
I was told it's about.
Well, instead of throwing it out, they can use it.
It's $2,000 savings by having this done this way. And I don't know if that meant for this is one school that they're doing it, or if the whole thing, you know?
From my understanding, the goal is to get it into all of the schools. Because they bring the kids up K through 5 recycling, and then they get into a new school, and then there's no recycling, and then kids wonder why. The other piece that I got during the meeting was that the estimate is about $50 cost to whatever organization provides the curb cards, to actually purchase the curb carts and give them to the schools. Just as a flat cost for the curb cart, not including the regular pickup. So there would be quite a bit of savings to the schools, but that's also tax dollars that are coming out from you to the county anyway.
How do you think we should proceed with this?
We weren't looking for action on it, as long as council's comfortable with us pursuing it to figure out a way to make it work, that we will, but I didn't want to engage anybody in council.
Recycle Ann Arbor wants to glean what Waste Management doesn't pay.
Right, I mean, that's really the key, is that Waste Management's willing to be cooperative about it.
And they're not taking it, it's just going into the garbage, right?
Right.
I guess they talked to Patrick about it, not this one.
Pat Greedy, yeah.
We just, actually, Pat Greedy was one of the Waste Management reps sitting in on the meeting.
I'll tell my students, I don't think that.
Well, we'll look into it and do something about it.
What would the headache be for us? And you have two haulers.
They have the schools,
I mean,
schools
yeah,
bad at you because you took away their sign and flashing sign, and now you're taking away money from them. That's the only answer I got.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing, is that they'll be Sioux haulers, but I mean, that's only for site. It's not like they're driving all around the community. It's a fairly close campus.
Right.
Motion to school.
Thanks for the update on that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Or still yours?
I think that's it. Yeah, I have a few things more than normal on consent agenda, just because it was a long packet, so. Starting the public hearing for the trust fund and the hardship guidelines, which we just need to do again, because last time we only adopted the change in the poverty limit, not the whole thing, so. And then we have the board review or reappointment.
Okay, I'll move on to my report. I included some information on the update that I provided at the last meeting about that opportunity through Dale Fisher. And I want council to know that I'm not really pushing one way or the other necessarily on this. Are people interested? Are people not interested? You know, there is some work on our end to try and have him help or try to find 5 businesses that would do the same thing, make the same dollar commitment we are. I don't know if there's 5 businesses in the community that want to do that for 2 pages or a couple pages, but I would like to get back to them and just either give them some idea of what we're thinking. You know, I haven't talked to him since the 5th or whatever it was that I was over there to see him. He's actually out of town for the next couple of weeks, but I think he was leaving on the 12th or something for a while. But is there interest at all in continuing the conversation, or something?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, yes, so if there's not 5 businesses, what happens?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. You know, I don't know, what if we're the only community? You know, I got a whole bunch of stuff like that to ask him.
Strange to me that we would be the ones that would recruit the businesses.
Well, he's looking for our help figuring, you know, his thought is that we know our businesses, and we know who might be interested in that, and, you know, he doesn't have all the personal contacts.
I see.
That kind of thing. It's not that he wouldn't, he'd be happy to come out and show the examples of his work. He could meet with us. I think they said they would be willing to do some of that. But, you know, just, again, if we aren't interested, then it saves the discussion on the next step. I think there's value here. I think 6,500 is a reasonable cost for what he's asking for. I think the value of the pictures is probably high too. Just the fact that we're getting the JPEG file forever. So, okay, well, I will let, I didn't hear a no from anybody. I'm not asking for an official vote yet. We'll, you may see this again as an item. Let me, get back with him and, we'll take it to the next step. I believe I only heard recorded one conflict in February, Paul. Did I hear that? I heard some dates that you were gonna be out of town in February. I think it was the 3rd Saturday of the month.
Yep, probably give exact dates.
15th to the 18th, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll be gone for the first council meeting on February 12th, is it?
Yes, it is the 12th, okay.
Yeah, I'll be gone the 15th through the 21st.
I'll be on the 10th through the 14th.
I'll be gone the 10th and the 24th. Or maybe the 24th,
We all
depends on
wanna
what
get it
happens this
in the
weekend.
same place.
Well, that pretty much includes February out.
No, okay, all right, I'll work with that. If there's anybody else that has something, appreciate the feedback. I'll get dates out here. Probably send an email out to everybody on what I'm kind of thinking, and then we can discuss it or final it at the next
This is
meeting.
the start of it.
Yeah, I'll pick late February. I'll just let you guys have some fun, and we'll do late February for the first goal setting. Does that sound okay to
I'm
everybody?
not, I'm gonna be around the first Saturday in March.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So do you have any questions for me on anything? Okay, we will move on to consent agenda.
I move we approve the four items listed on the consent agenda. Consideration of bills and payroll in the amount of $244,812.29. And the reappointment of Pete Potzos to the Board of Review. A resolution approving the hardship guidelines for the 2018 Board of Review. And setting of a public hearing for the Michigan National Resources Trust Fund grant submittal for March 12, 2018.
Moved by Fisher, second by Smith. Thank you both. All those in favor of those four items?
Point of information, since it's a resolution, ought we do it as a roll call? Or not? Since there's a resolution as part of the consent agenda, should we do the vote as a roll call?
We tentatively should pull it off then.
Well, I guess I can do it either way. I mean, I figured it would be unanimous, so I wasn't really worried about it.
I have a question as well.
Pull it off.
All right, then I'm gonna pull it off and make it,
The three items listed on the consent agenda.
let's pull it off. It'll get inserted in the new L1 slot if it's okay, where L1 was.
L11?
Or, yeah, we can make it L2 if you want. It's fine. Okay, so we have three items on the consent agenda. Motion by Fisher, second by Smith for J1, 2, and 4, to approve J1, 2, and 4.
I have a question. I thought we had an email from you or that you were going to have additional recommendations on the vacancies at this meeting. Did I misread that or?
It was in his report that it'll be the first meeting in February.
Next meeting.
Next meeting, okay.
I've got, working on a meeting with the young man who's videotaping us.
Okay.
We've got to exchange dates yet.
All right. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Okay. That was good discussion on an item we weren't supposed to have discussion on. No. it's not. All those in favor of approving the three items, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so we're gonna go to new business item L2, which is discussion of Dexter Community Schools project, since we have someone in the audience. And then we'll jump down former J3.
So we just asked for a representative from Granger, Greg Brand, second generation Brand, who works for the Dexter Community School, to come just in case council had any questions on the school projects as they're currently proposed. We've gotten through the review, I think, fairly successfully. I think basically all the issues have been addressed with the exception of the right-of-way dedication, which the schools are not interested in doing. Other than that, I think most recently, some issues Patrick had in a memo addressed sufficiently for us. And like I said, I think the right-of-way is really the last outstanding issue.
So what's been passed out? Is that something I have?
No, so these are drawings that basically are just the most recent version of the new elementary school site overall. The next one is kind of the traffic planning, which was an email shared with Michelle and Patrick and a few others, just to kind of show traffic flows. Then it is the new quad field that's being put in north of Creekside, North Baker. It says Shield Road for unknown reasons, but that's Baker. And then the double turf field being put in at the high school. And then finally, a very broad site plan, very rough site plan for the alternative ed collaboration lab on Shield Road. So these drawings are included because this is the first phase of construction. This is work that is either already contracted or out to bid right now. We will have some additional work coming up this summer, namely an addition to the high school, an addition to Mill Creek, and then a renovation of Wiley to allow for the secure entrance of Wiley, since it's the last elementary school that doesn't have a secure vestibule. And I can come back when we have further design information on those and update you at that time. But this is what's out on the street now. So for those that haven't seen it, the new elementary school is a twin of Cornerstone Elementary. They're connected by a shared workspace that all of the kids will be able to, from most schools, will be able to use, set up the experiments and leave them there for a while instead of being in their classrooms. And a really exciting collaboration that kind of combine the two elementary schools. They'll still operate as two separate schools, but they'll have a combined space where they can work together in some experience. We show the revised drop-off. So basically, greatly expanding, over doubling the size of the existing Cornerstone parking lot, but still using the same curb cuts as far as entrances and exits. Then also taking what used to be the Mill Creek bus loop and adding a spur off to the side just for a third point. That would probably be more parents who are going to drop off and then turn left and go out Dexter and Arbor Road could use that exit and hope to avoid a little bit of the traffic. And then recreating the tennis courts and taking out two of those baseball fields to put back in one of the fields that we took out in order to build this school. So then if you look on the next page, it's much the same picture, but it just shows student traffic. The orange is where parent drop-off comes in and out. So you can see Mill Creek is served by both Dexter Ann Arbor and Dan Hoey Road. The new elementary will be served through what used to be the Mill Creek bus loop, as well as off of Dan Hoey directly across from the industrial park. And Cornerstone would use that entrance as well as the entrance that is further to the, let's see, that's west?
Yeah.
Yeah, downhill. The bus loop would remain the same as is. And we're finalizing everything, going through review with Michelle and OHM and our traffic consultants, Midwestern, as far as exactly what improvements and changes are made to Dan Hoey Road to support the additional traffic.
Does the on-site vehicular drop-off for the new elementary and Cornerstone one way? Does it go on one side, not the other?
No, so actually in the center there, that's a pedestrian island.
Okay.
And so the thought is that you kind of come in either one of those entrances and you leave out the same one. So you'd have kind of two drop-off loops operating in there.
Then there's a connector.
Does that mean that if I'm dropping somebody off in the new elementary school and I got somebody in the Cornerstone school that I drop them off at one spot and they go to what school they want to, but I don't necessarily, if I wanted to come out and go back in, I have to go back in the other?
No, so if for instance you were dropping off a couple kids and then you were gonna park, say you came in the Cornerstone drop-off, but that parking area was full for whatever reason, you could, down at the end, you could drive around and into the new elementary area.
Okay.
But
in that parking lot area?
Yeah, the center island is really there. We just want enough car queuing so there's nobody's standing out on Dan Hoey Road. So getting enough parents to be able to pull up. I mean, we could always ask them to put kids on the bus, but that is quite difficult, so.
Okay, sorry.
And Dan Hoey gets expanded to 3 lanes with a dedicated left?
I complete.
That's correct, and so that's actually not shown on this one.
Yeah, this is an old.
I can see two types of vehicles come in, one to go into the new elementary, one to go into Cornerstone. So there's a backup at new elementary to turn left, and then there's not enough room for people at Cornerstone to turn left out. I don't know how far of a distance that is, a couple hundred, I guess. I know how traffic stacks up real quick when people are less than courteous. Is this going to be a two-way access from the north-south rear access to Mill Creek there along Danhoy Road? Is that going to be two ways? This long orange line here that runs parallel with Danhoy?
Yeah, so that currently is one in and then turn and a right turn, and we maintain that, and then the traffic could either continue up to Mill Creek or turn left onto the drop-off.
Is there parking along there also?
A little bit of parking, and actually, we're likely gonna move that to the north side so that if you park there, you did not have to cross the street. Or, I'm sorry, east side.
So did I read, is there a plan to connect Danhoy through to Dexter Harbor so it goes over to Mill Creek?
Not at this time. There is basically, school trucks are able to drive on the paths. They're wide enough to support truck traffic, but we don't necessarily want all of the parents driving just because of the amount of kids that walk around there.
But you could get from Cornerstone and drop the same kid out without having to get back on the road.
You can drop off kids at both Mill Creek and either Cornerstone or the new elementary without
Going back on the road.
going back onto the right.
Yeah, they just have to come in the back or side.
Yeah. And
How do you do that?
so if you were going to drop off at both Mill Creek and the new elementary, you could turn into the Mill Creek parking lot and drop them off, and then come back and drop them off at the new elementary. So that sidewalk is continuous. You would drop off there, and kids could go either to new elementary or Cornerstone. What they've been discussing is all of the children for both schools will enter through Cornerstone off of the bus loop, so there's already going to be an intermingling. So they're planning on internally handling wherever a kid comes in, they get them to the right school. And then this would also, basically it doesn't change the function of the bus loop, which has been very successful for them in keeping kids and buses away from parent traffic and separated.
This is perhaps a question for city staff. It looks like the sidewalk that runs the entire length of Danhoy is located outside of the right-of-way. That
Currently,
correct?
that's true.
Huh?
Currently, that's true. It's in the future right of way.
Do we have easements for that?
No, we have an
There's
easement
just
for
public
this.
sidewalk on property we don't own.
They plow it, but we maintain it, is that, yeah. But no, there's not an easement. We'd like an easement. As I put in my letter, I think it's a discussion we need to continue to have. I understand that they don't want to dedicate the road right of way, but we could do an easement.
Well, I guess I'd be curious what liability we have for something that looks like a public sidewalk that we don't actually own.
I believe it was put in as part of the Safe Routes to School, was that?
No, that's been there.
It's been there.
Really, sidewalk liability is fairly minimal because otherwise it's just built sidewalks. It's not really a liability. And we have replaced some flags in there. They've been lifted or, whatever they do with all this as well.
I do have a couple of other questions. I'm gonna go to this colorful fella.
Okay.
First is a general observation. It's kind of sad that all the fields are the exact same field. It'd be fun if one was in 5 feet or so we can have a little more fun with different ones. But my question is,
Wait, what did you say, what was that?
that all the fields are exactly the same. Do you want if one was in 10 feet or, I don't know. Because you get really excited then when you play with the shorter fence. That's gonna be big dinger night, they're gonna get the bigger Dairy
Well,
Queen.
they're getting ready for it.
So my question with the ball fields is, my understanding is that's where the trail is now supposed to connect over. And I can't see exactly where that happens in here. So am I off on where the trail is supposed to connect through here? Is that a completely different space? Or is that something I'm not seeing?
I think the idea is that it would be north of the ball fields. That it would run along the edge and then out to Baker.
We did have the preliminary plans, had made sure we weren't infringing on it. I know those aren't finished yet. But
I think that's flood.
That's the stream.
That's
Okay.
the stream.
So it'd be somewhere between the edge of the field and the stream.
I guess my question for further reviews is to make sure we do have that room for that to go in there without causing problems with the stream. Hold on, please.
So Greg, the school is aware of the tap fee?
The school is aware of the tap fee. They would love to discuss it with you further. They responded in an engineering letter, which I know Michelle has already responded to as well. And in very basic terms, stating they're not opening, or they're not increasing their usage by 24 classrooms. And this is a political discussion and not an engineering discussion, so I'm not the right person to really discuss the message, but that's their general stance.
But the problem is that, of course, we can't control what they're gonna do with Bates in the future, so they can make it a school a year from now, and then we don't give credits for changes in use, so it's really not even a political discussion, it's really not a discussion.
Yeah, that's why I asked, you're aware of the tap fee?
I am aware of the tap fee, yes, sir.
Okay.
It's a typo.
The reason I asked if you were aware of it was that Dr. Timmis suggested that it wasn't something that was counted on when the bond was put together, which meant that somebody wasn't aware of the tap fee. You guys know what it is though now, 200 and whatever is in the memo?
Yes, we understand what the tap fee is. At the time the bond was put together, there was a lot of discussion about the Bates get demolished, or, you know, what's going to happen? Is there something being taken off in lieu of, or is Bates being added onto? And so that's why it is a separate, that's why the fee wasn't a separate line.
On the screen map, can you tell me what direction is up? And is this really Shield Road?
That is not Shield Road, that's Baker Road, so that up is north. Yeah.
I have a question on the last one. So I don't understand this at all. I see a picture of it, but I don't understand it. So this orange thing over here on the side here is what?
So this, yes, I apologize, this is very rough. This is a, roughly speaking, 40 by 70 building.
Pole barn? Metal clad?
It is a masonry building with wood roof framing. And it would look, the attempt is to make it look similar to both the residential area that it's in, but also, let's say, take hints from the Henry Thurston Fieldhouse, the new fieldhouse at Albert Field. So have some of the school colors in the masonry itself. Exact location and what that driveway actually looks like are being developed. Kroll Construction has along with OX Architecture, has a design build contract for the entirety of this work. And so they will be putting together an actual layout plan. This is what happens when you ask an engineer like me to locate a building real quick.
Gotcha. So this other gray, is that parking in there theoretically?
Theoretically, that'd be a gravel path with, let's call it 4 parking spots for the teachers. Generally, the students that use this building don't drive.
And the other building is gonna be the residential one that's been switched with a.
That's the existing house that the.
It's there already? Okay. Now, where's the pathway that goes there now along the fence? I guess, I don't see the fence there. Am I just missing the fence?
The fence is off to the right where the ledge is.
Okay.
So that path that you see kind of curving up, that's what goes to the fence. Yeah. In the bottom right-hand corner.
Right, this one down here?
Yeah, that curves up and meets the fence.
So, at one time, I go back to the master plan for the city as relates to the trail system that we have, okay? Now, that has presently been modified to go out towards Baker Road, but there's still potential that could, on this cost factor, what we've heard, okay, cost factor, that it would still be a way to connect yet that trail to the high school.
Yes.
Coming through this site, where would you see that happening?
I would expect that the trail either I would expect it to match up behind the press box in that area. Come
Okay.
back up in the woods there.
From there to the
Follow
front?
down and then take the bridge over to the
And
high
then
school.
the second question I have is that originally there was going to be also a canoe kayak drop-off off of this trail with access off of Shield Road so that we'd have a whole other way to access the creek there. And right now, there's a lot of people that come into that area to do fishing along there. Okay, so where would you see that if that would happen in the future?
We don't have any plans for where that could go. The tenants in 8100 have a life lease, so they'll be there.
Till they die?
They're in good health. I'd expect another 20-some years.
So how much do they own of that property? Do they go clear back to the fence back here?
It
Or do they
goes-
just own the building itself?
So the property itself is, as it was previously split out by the county, it has not been modified since they moved in there, so it's from Alright Field to the center of the creek, and from here, that's basically where the outdoor lab ends.
Yeah.
So it's the
So
same.
they own all, they're gonna own all that property?
The Ritter property is what I think of it as. It hasn't changed since that time.
So there's basically no access to the creek at that spot there for a kayak, canoe?
Not at this
drop-off?
point in time.
Not now. That's disappointing. And that plan has been drawn up long before this project ever came to fruition. And it's been on our books for a long time. No matter what happens with the drop-off there, I would like to see some way that we can identify where the pathway will come through there, so that we do have connectivity for people and kids that want to walk. And the reason I say that there is presently no access to the outdoor lab, right now, at all. The outdoor lab, 17 acres, that was a major nature center, defined by the state, by the way, okay, as a natural woods, state natural woods. There's no access to it at all, public access. From through this site or to the parking lots of the school.
Greg, how would you suggest we have that conversation with your team?
I think that it truly just be a conversation with Dr. Thomas.
I had that conversation, he said it could be worked out, he said, but I don't see anybody working it out.
Well, I mean, moving the Avery's to 8100 was the only decision they made in the last few months to deal with the roundabout construction. So, I mean, they did that to facilitate.
I want to be clear, it's not that we're not.
Right, it's just
We're
not something
against
they're-
it, or we've been told not to do anything. It's just we haven't been told to do something with it.
That's all very recent.
When, there's a lot of cars in this picture, when does that happen?
Football games.
Because I never go down that far.
When that one, the bridge was being built.
When it was taken, it was a lot of.
If it's
This
county,
this was the county aerial, well, it says, no, that's what it is. I don't know
they
when
take
the
the picture during the football game. The county generally takes aerials in the spring, and the last time I knew they did the whole county was 2015.
There's other sporting events too that draws.
It could be a track meet, but it's not
Lacrosse
a
or
football game.
track.
They never have that many. College for football game.
Maybe
Unless it's
lacrosse.
the band.
That's usually a little darker.
I just don't recall seeing that many cars.
I was bored.
So, are you guys, what's the timing then of all this? What,
So, currently we're waiting for the MDQ review on the football field area. There are some pocket wetlands, we've submitted a mitigation plan. It'll be when the MDQ chooses to review it. But we've gotten preliminary guidance from them that they like the plan, they just have to get through the full review. It's basically creating a new wetland off to the right of this page. And so once we have that, we're able to start earthwork operations, and the goal is to have the artificial turf fields operational in August. The baseball fields, we expect to start work on those when the frost thaws come off, so March, April, depending on what the rest of the winter holds for us. And then we'll hold until Little League season gets through. I believe it's the end of July is when they reduce the number of fields. And then we'll do this work this fall at Creekside, and with the hopes of being able to seed it in October so that they can play on it next year.
2019.
2019, yep. The elementary school is ongoing right now, footings are going in, and expected completion is December of this year, end of December.
thank you. Dan?
So you guys are gonna be sprinkling?
Yes.
Where does that water come from?
The existing irrigation well is.
Okay, you're from the well, and you guys already have it.
There,
And that's
there's one over.
And that's where the drinking fountain water is gonna come from?
The drinking fountain water will probably come from the school, just because I don't think that's possible.
Yes, do we need to know?
that well?
Unless you can talk to Dr.
It was there when I was in school.
See here, the other, how do you get out of there? But you make a loop here and come back out, right?
Greg, one of the review comments we got a little while back was related to the right of way, was that there was a concern over bike lanes.
Yes.
Can you share with me what that concern of a bike lane would be? I mean, we could put a bike lane there now.
But my understanding is, and Dr. Timmons would be the right person to get more detail from, but they are concerned having the age of students that go to these schools riding bikes on the side of the road. They prefer them to ride on the sidewalk that's in front of the school. That's, as I understand it, that is the concern, with having bike lanes on the road at that location.
I see.
But we're more likely to put in bike lanes in next to the road if we don't have right of way to put separated pathways.
Bike lanes like that down Dexter and Iowa.
I'm just interested in the feedback. I'm just trying to figure out from a
That
big
is.
picture perspective.
Yeah, that is the concern, is that if bike lanes were on the road, then students would use them, and they don't like their students.
I mean, how many people, how many students bike on Dexter Ann Arbor Road to Mill Creek?
Usually they take the sidewalk.
The ones I've seen come across from here on,
Meadowview.
yeah, up Meadowview across there at the light,
Right.
right there.
Okay.
That's the one I've seen. And I was, the Rotary did a thing one time where we went out there and stood there, volunteered to get kids across the school and I walk the days, walk the school day or whatever it was, yeah. So I stood there with the guy that was the flag guy. Yeah, they were all bikers came across that way.
Other questions for Greg? Appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for the update. I hope your leg feels better.
Thanks.
I hope you're doing something fun when that happens.
I was curious.
Carrying my kid home
Oh,
from school.
gee.
so.
Okay, so now we are taking what was J3, please. Which was the consideration of the resolution approving the hardship guidelines for the 2018 Board of Review. I'll move that.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, second by Fisher. Okay, discussion or questions? Questions? Thanks,
Did you say
Patrick.
you had a question about that? Didn't you say you had a question about this resolution?
No, he had a question about the appointments.
Oh. Sorry.
No.
Okay, okay, no questions on it then? Okay, call the vote.
Oh, all right, yeah, it was a procedural question.
Okay, please call the vote.
Fisher?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Knight?
Yes.
Cousins?
Yes.
Smith?
Yeah.
Tell?
Yeah.
Keel?
Yes. Okay, motion carries, thank you. New business item L3, discussion of letter from former charter commissioners regarding city election date change. Yes.
What is the advantage and disadvantage to doing this? What is motivating this letter?
I think it's just turnout is generally higher, and we have to have a general election in every even year, right? So, and generally it's presidential or gubernatorial, so the turnout is higher, and that's where the city election or village election used to be, in the last since election consolidation. And then we're not having an election just for council, it would have something else on the ballot, I guess. I don't understand it anymore.
It thought occurred to me that if you have a really, really complex ballot, which you might have, you would be lost at the bottom of the pack.
Right, that's definitely one of the arguments that we actually discussed at the charter commission level.
Did it?
The lengthy ballot and, being at the bottom of it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's a trade-off, yeah, you do get more turnout, is that an informed participation? But, you don't know.
That was the state's rationale. They said that, the township clerks were saying that their ballots were getting longer and longer. And so they decided to,
Put the cities on the odd.
but, because the city, it doesn't have anything to do with the township anymore. I mean, that's,
Yeah, so they're taking, change our resolution.
because now on our ballots, we wouldn't get the township items on there, so. Yeah, I think we'd be in good shape if we did decide we wanted to change.
So there are a couple of cities that have gone through this switch recently. I think it'd be worthwhile to get information from them to share, this is what happened and this is what we found.
Isn't Ann Arbor just say they did it?
Yeah, Ann Arbor just did it, I mean, I think their terms just got extended.
Is that what would happen? My term would get extended?
Yeah. Put everybody on an even year.
Are you the only one?
No, everybody's will get extended a year.
1 year?
You'd be up a year past where you.
I don't know if we're gonna make it.
That's what I'm saying. Keep adding time on, I'm in jail.
We'll subtract one off.
Yeah, right. You could choose to add or subtract. You just
Get
sign
thrown
up
up.
first.
Give you the option.
Do you give me time off for good behavior?
Apparently not.
So what do we want to do with this? We did.
I personally favor. I think it comes from the group that has looked at this, and I think that the potential of getting more electorate to vote is worth the change. And I agree with Jim that I don't think that the additional ballot issues are gonna be that much more on our ballots than we have. And I think that people are getting more sophisticated, that they know what their budget items they can put in the ballot. I agree with you. I think we have more sophisticated voters on that. If you can't get them out, you can't get them out to vote. If you don't get them out to vote.
I don't have a problem with that.
All right, so you're gonna, who suggestion was to call the communities that have done it? Zach, did you make that suggestion?
I don't have a
We
problem with
Get
that.
us information next time we have space.
We'll see what the adjustments are gonna require.
Okay, well, we can, like, so we didn't really look into it any further just until council weighed in on it.
Bring it back.
Let's do the process.
Yeah. Okay with that.
One of them, either one of them.
Okay.
Okay, this item L4, consideration of late property transfer affidavit filing fee.
I'll move the resolution on page 95 to not charge a fee.
I'll support.
Moved by Michelle's. Second by Knight, thank you both. Page 95.
Just one correction, the first paragraph should say called to order at 7 PM.
Say that again, Zach, please.
The first paragraph, meeting called at 7 PM, not 7:30.
Good catch.
So I guess my question is, why haven't we been charging a fee?
It just wasn't brought to our attention when we became a city and set up assessing, like I said in here. I mean, it was just overlooked from being a city because Chris isn't doing it in any of his other jurisdictions.
Why were you thinking?
Well, from my reading of this, it sounds like there's not a real benefit because we, correct me if I'm wrong, we get the information, as soon as they file it with the county, the computers update and it gets spit to us. So we know who owns it. We don't have to worry about tracking it down. Whereas in olden days, we had to have a paper copy or we didn't know who had it. So administratively, are we getting the bang for the buck that we're charging people?
Well, you're basically charging them for a form that we don't need.
I thought it was gonna keep Chris Reyes' salary.
The 1% does
I
that.
mean, you, like I said, I mean, we certainly can do it, it's just that I just think that because it's not something that we need to have, I mean, he doesn't seek them out if we don't get them.
Right.
So,
So you can hit the print.
It is a missed revenue source though if we don't do it.
Yep.
I guess I see it as, they don't automatically have to pay it. So how would they know that they should be paying it? Or why are these people missing that step?
It's on the form.
well, if they don't know the form, so like if you're just transferring property, changing the name, something like that, and you're not working with a lawyer or a title company, you might not know that you have to do the form.
That's what it was, so I wonder how are they missing it?
Right, so like if you're working with a title company, yeah, I mean, they're gonna make you fill the form out, and generally either they file it for you, or you sign something saying you're gonna file it.
Okay.
So, you know,
I
that
see.
makes sense. The problem is just the other ones where they don't
Family
know
member.
that they need to file it, and then you're basically just sending them a $200 bill after the 45 plus 40 days
Yeah, I
pass.
understand now.
Because it's not, I mean, once we see the deed, and that gets logged in, so, you know, that was more my concern about it. Is people that don't know that they need to file it. And like I said, I mean, obviously, if we did decide to charge it, we would have to, you know, we would just advertise that, hey, if you're changing the name, make sure to file this form, or else you're gonna get a fee, so.
Other discussion? Okay, motion by Michelle, second by That's the, to not implement a fee on page 95. Please call the vote.
Smith.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Knight. Yes. Cousins.
Yes.
Keel.
No. Motion carries. New business item L5.
I'll move the quote from Raymer for preventive maintenance,
Motion by
not
Cousins,
to exceed $26,200.
second by Smith. Thank you.
So this is the work on the well we discussed previously. We have the quote for what we think. It's really dependent on the condition of basically everything when they pull it. We will replace the casing to plastic at a minimum. And I think we said we hope that it'll be no more than $18,800, but just in case the pump and motor need to be replaced, you know, we wanted to make sure we were prepared because it's hard when you just don't know until you pull it.
Questions? Very straightforward. Zach?
So we budgeted 20,000. If we're doing this every year, just a general quick question of why it's likely to be higher.
We don't think that, I mean, it's unlikely we're going to need to replace the pump and motor because they're only from 2012. So
Okay.
that's why
So
it's for
it's
the
the worst
amount.
case.
Right, exactly.
There's no indication, I mean, every year we pump to waste, we put a meter on, but there's no indication if we check the voltage, the power on it once a year, if there's any problems with that equipment, so. But this is what it costs to redo everything.
Right, and the cleaning is the big thing because that keeps some of the stress off if we keep the screen clean.
We're dealing with this galvanized pipe too. If it breaks, when you pull that well out, that's gonna go crashing down. And there's things that could happen, you know, kind of out of our control. But I'm hoping that we caught this early enough in the process to put the thing in now that we're not gonna have that problem. Because we know it lasts about 7 years. We know that.
The galvanized, yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions? When will the work be done then, Dan?
We're hoping in the next couple of weeks. once
Okay.
it's-
All right, right away.
Right away. Well, we got to before.
Yes, sir. That's what I thought.
Yeah. You're right.
Probably before the new filter gets here, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay, please call the vote.
Knight. Yes. Fisher.
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Cousins.
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item L6, consideration of purchase and installation
I
of.
move the installation and replacement of LED lights for not to exceed $22,570 from Norton McKay and Hop.
Okay, motion by Cousins, thank you.
Second.
Second by Michelle's.
So this is a project we've been working on for a while. We negotiated and received a $39,000 settlement from Sylvania because of the failure of the bulbs. Since then, we looked at different bulbs and we've used this bulb and it's been performing okay. It does have a 5-year warranty in case there is yet another LED issue, but hopefully that won't happen again. So the good thing is the cost of the LEDs is much, much cheaper than the original cost from 2010. The technology's improved, the cost has gone down. So we will be able to replace all of the fixtures that were included in the settlement, the 145, plus buy some extra, plus have some money extra for another project that we're kind of looking into, whether we want to do more poles or change out some of the landscaping bed lighting that's not working well and not LED. But we really wanted to get started on replacing the increasingly discolored poles. Sometimes they just look so yellowish green. So this lets Hop get started on that, that basic 145, and then we'll get some extras. I guess some extras also, I mean, I'm really glad with how the pricing came out because we're gonna be able to get a lot done for that 39,000 that isn't coming out of our pocket.
Zach?
Do we have any options with the color temperature for these lights, or was it the 4,000 kelvins is our only option?
The only thing, we had different wattages in different poles. I don't know about the.
Over temperature.
Yeah.
How are the poles themselves doing? Are they in solid shape?
Oh, you mean the 145? Yeah, those were, because they're not really that old, I don't think, in the grand scheme, and they've been repainted and things, because those are all streetscape poles. Mostly, and some of them are even newer than that, down in Infection and North Central. Because this does include some on Central, they were put in as part of the Central Street project. Because we've been using that retrofit kit on all of our projects, so that's how we got to the 145.
Any further questions or comments?
I was just wondering about the part that the welding company is making. What
So
that-
when they originally retrofitted them, there was a part that was removed and not kept because who knew? So now we had a choice of either buying them from Melanie for like $90 a piece, or we had took one to Clapbridge and he's fabricating them. So it's like a round piece that goes in each pole. So yeah, it's a much better deal.
Okay, good question. Any other questions? Ms. Jones, please call the vote.
Cousins?
Yes.
Knight? Yes. Tell?
Yes.
Fisher? Michelle?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes. Motion carries. New business item 7.
Make that motion as well. Place of internal mechanism in the downtown clock. Not to exceed $7,000.
Second.
Motion by Cousins, second by Smith. Thank you both.
The original clock was installed, I'm assuming, with the streetscape, but the internal mechanism has gotten less and less reliable over time. It's getting up there now, because that would have been early 2000s probably, late 90s. So we got a quote from the people that have been maintaining the clock, and that was purchased from to replace basically all the internal components, including the lighting. It will be changed out to LED as part of it. So it really needs to get done because they have to set it a lot.
Yeah.
And they don't need to be.
Nice, some, upgraded components.
Right.
Right,
And
twice a day.
Basically, right, replacing all of the guts of the clock.
When would the work have to be done, later, after?
It could really be anytime. I think they said 6 to 8 weeks or something, but
Pricing
it'll
good
just.
through February.
Yeah, it'll go, well, as long as we approve it, but I wanna say Kurt said that it would just go, when they have someone in the area, they'll take care of it within a certain amount of weeks. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the spring, they can do it anytime.
So, spring would be better weather.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be up to them.
Because you're opening up exposing the inside, so that.
Can we let the public know that we've approved the internal components that have been purchased so that?
I think, did you
Those
do
are-
that, Michelle?
I haven't done it yet, I'll be doing it.
Oh,
I wanted to
yeah, I
wait.
had asked
So
Michelle.
that those on social media that are picking on us understand that we've taken action on this?
Yeah, I asked Michelle to post it on whatever site. she's on.
Perhaps next year we can get a sculpture of a giant pencil next to it hitting the reset button.
Just make it big black numbers. There you go.
Okay, please call the vote, Ms. Jones.
Knight? Yes. Fisher?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Cousins?
Yes.
Tell?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes. New business item L8, planning commission recommendation to adopt zoning ordinance text amendments, Article 5.
I'll make that motion on page 114.
Motion by Smith,
Second.
second by Michelle. Thank you both. Motion on page 114.
And that's a motion
To approve, right? Okay, that's what I was.
Yes, that is a motion to approve.
Questions on the changes?
Just I'll throw a comment out there for future parking and loading section revisions is, it'd be nice to have a bit more, it's touched in there lightly, but a bit more flexibility for shared parking and for a bit clearer language for credit for if they're near transit or in a walking area. So I recall in here, they can make their pitch to the planning commission to adjust the numbers up or down. It'd be good to have a little more predictable process for that, for future.
Michelle, my only question is just in the opening paragraph of 501.
I'm sorry, 501, yes?
It reads funny to me. So, there shall be provided in all districts,
Except the central business.
right, except the CBD, at the time of erection or enlargement of any building or structure or change to a off-street parking space. Is the word, with adequate access to all spaces? Is the word space needed?
Yes. No, it's off-street parking space in the collective area. I struggled with this when I first was looking at it. I think space means area, and so that's why it doesn't have an S. But if you would like it worded so that it talks more about it being an off-street parking area with adequate access to all spaces, I can do that.
Yeah, I support that. It makes it just cleaner.
Okay.
Just to read. Okay, yeah.
That's where I was going.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Okay, seeing none, Ms. Jones, please call the vote. To approve?
Dell?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Knight?
Yes.
Cousins?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good job on that. New business item L9, consideration of resolution to adopt a payment in lieu of parking fee for the village commercial district.
I will move that resolution with $9,000 per space.
I thought we had established it by resolution.
What's that?
I thought we had established it by resolution.
We are?
Yep.
Yeah, that's page
This is the
207.
next, oh, yeah, all right, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Oh, sorry, my page numbers are.
Moved by Michelle, second by Nate, was it?
Yes.
Thank you both.
And so since I
9,000.
moved, I'll throw out there why I did the 9,000, is that it's important for us to get as close to the actual cost, but there is a public benefit for the community at large to encourage folks to do that. So $500 a parking space, we're not gonna lose our shirts, but it could encourage folks who are looking, do I want to put parking? Now, of course, obviously, I think if you have a choice between putting a parking space on your property or a building on your property, you're gonna put a building, but that was my reasoning with the 9,000, not the 95.
It's a little higher than I want to go, but
Yeah. So let me.
it's out there. But floor is yours.
The people that just bought the old bike shop, okay? Mike and Courtney,
They didn't buy it.
huh?
They didn't buy it. One of Courtney's clients bought it, and they will be purchasing it from her.
From her.
Yes.
But one of the requirements is to put in parking there?
It would be an upgrade of their existing off-street parking.
And where does that apply with this,
It doesn't. It's in the central business district.
the
It has
center
no
district?
effect.
So we're talking about only in the
Only in
village
the village
commercial?
commercial. But for sake of discussion, let's say it was. In that particular case, that's an existing area that's already provided. All we'd be asking them to do is upgrade it so it's not gravel anymore. So they would not be charged. But for, let's say,
Give me an example of one that this is gonna apply to.
okay, village commercial, okay, next to Don Darnell's buildings, let's say Northern Pizza decides they no longer gonna keep their warehouse buildings. They sell their property and somebody comes in and takes it all down and they wanna do a new development. And they're gonna utilize the entire space. They wouldn't be able to provide any on-street parking. I'm sorry, off-site, off-street parking, that's when the fee would come in. And it would be for whatever spaces they need over and above what was required on the space, on the site.
How about bed and breakfast or those places that may be similar to that kind? What's their requirements gonna be under this ordinance? And which most of them would be in a residential area that would.
There are residential areas that are zoned village commercial. So, along Forest Street on the south side, Grand Street on the north side next to Mr. Darnell's buildings. On Baker Road, there's village commercial. On Ann Arbor Street, where, on the other side of Monument Park to Dover. And then on Central Street, where the Honey House is and some properties in there. So a lot of those probably wouldn't be able to provide parking on site if they were using an existing building. And so they would be subject to the fee.
So how many estimated spaces are you talking that you can guesstimate here? Or do you have an accurate number there that where this was gonna apply for?
So you've got with your packet, if you go to section 503,
okay,
that lists all the parking requirements per a use.
Okay.
So, I'm looking to see, I don't think you actually have bed and breakfast listed in here. Yeah, it is, right here, motel without restaurant, lounge, bed and breakfast in. So it's one space per guest room, plus 2 spaces for employees. So this is assuming that there's going to be 2 employees, so it's saying 2 spaces.
But I don't know if that even applies to employees because.
You don't know how many employees somebody's going to have.
Well, you may not have any because most of the time bed and breakfast don't employ anybody. They actually have, as I remember, our ordinance includes it, it has to be owner operated.
Right, the proprietor has to live on site.
So that's not an employee.
Yeah, that would be the person.
That would be an employee?
That would be an employee. They'd have to have 2 parking spaces. And then 1 for each room, so let's say let's use, we'll just say that the house has 3 guest rooms. So they would have to have 3 parking spaces, and then the 2 employee spaces.
Yeah, but let's keep to the topic though. And maybe, I realize it's on topic, but, so my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only been twice where we've had to actually charge the fee that we're talking about here.
Right, and both
Don Darnell paid for it on Dexter Ann Arbor Street when he redid the gingerbread house, remember? And then he paid $2,500 times however many spaces he wasn't able to provide behind the building, that he needed further requirement. So, you know, if he the calculation came out where it needed 10 and he provided 6, then the 4 he couldn't provide off street, he paid 4 times, whatever, I'm just giving you you understand the math. So then he had to do it again over on Grand for, I think, 5 spaces. I think he paid $12,500.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
I think he paid $12,500. $2,500 was the previous amount. Times 5, and then you can see that $2,500 that's on Marie's fund balance thing, that there's a little line item on there that says,
Right now, he did that instead of paying $12,500.
No, he paid $12,500 because he couldn't build the 5 spaces that was
Right,
part
but
of
if
the.
we change this to $9,000.
If we change it to 9,000, the next person that has 5 spaces that they can't build on their site, they'd have to pay $45,000.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well, if the same situation occurred for Don Darnell over again, or if we had the ninth, he used to be paying $45,000.
Yes, yes, I misheard you.
So I guess my.
And the theory, Paul, obviously, is that the theory is that we're supposed to then take that money and use it as part of a public improvement to create the parking. I believe the last money that we had in that fund was used during the Central/Ann Arbor Street project because we improved parking. We had actually added paved spaces on Central Street. We improved spaces on Dexter Ann Arbor. You know, but if we went to go do something now with $12,500, according to Patrick, we'd only be able to really build one space, whereas the cost of a space is $9,500. If that's truly, you know.
So this doesn't prevent anyone from building the parking on their own lot.
Right.
This is just in those cases where they can't because their use is too big, or they don't want to because, as Councilmember Cousins did when he didn't want to buy this lot and then tear down this building and that building. This would have been your option. That would have actually been from what you said last time.
Does it negate the need for storm drainage then too in your lot?
Yes.
Well, Don Darnell would argue that one of the reasons he couldn't fit the 5 spaces on the property is because he had all other things that we were asking him to do.
Yeah.
Stormwater management, you know,
Well,
being
he didn't put
one.
stormwater management in the gingerbread house, but he did on Grand Street.
Right, with Gingerbread House, he didn't add any pavement. With the 80 grand, he added he created impervious surface.
Correct, okay.
And
Yeah,
so-
he didn't have because it was already there in the back.
Yeah, but if you don't put the parking spaces there, you don't have to put the stormwater for the spaces you don't put.
It is a quandary. I did have the conversation with the DDA director in Ferndale. The sliding scale, if you will, that they have for parking, their engineer came back with a $9,000 price tag. However many years ago they did this for a parking space, and they basically cut it in half. For the first 5 spaces, they take it down to 4,000 for the next 6 through 10 that would be required, and then it goes down to 3,000 for anything for the next 11 on up. He said that the city decided to do more of this, have this fee in lieu of parking more as a public-private sort of partnership where the developer is providing some money and the city basically would take up that other portion if the parking ever had to be provided. But they only do it for certain types of businesses that come in, for the restaurants and consumption of alcoholic beverages on site. They also do it for residential.
For what, you say for residential?
For residential. So in other words, if you've got a new residential development going in, like we've got 150 Jeffords, if they couldn't provide all the parking on site, then they'd be paying based on that sliding scale. What it's done is, he said, it hasn't been a barrier, and yet it has. But it's been more of a check and balance. So a business coming in, especially if it's a restaurant or a bar, somebody might have, oh, I have a great idea, I've always wanted to do this, but they really, it may not be a viable business. Having this fee sort of provided that check where people have to really think about, well, can I really afford this? You know, maybe they end up going to a different community, but it might not have been a business that would have worked if that fee wasn't there.
I'll make my statement that I made the last time. I think that the 9,000 is too high, or the 92, whatever that number was before. And I think there is a responsibility if we really think that we're trying to attract businesses and try to develop any kind of commercial activity in these areas, that we are going to price them out of their desire to come in. Now, in my case, it wasn't, and I made that decision, Pat and I made that decision, but I think others may feel that they can't do that. We didn't establish a business. We weren't coming out of nothing and trying to do something. So, but I think that fee is too high, and I think you're going to find out by setting it that amount that it is going to be restrictive on people that were going to try to put something in that, you got to realize, these are not big operations. We're not making tons of money if you only have to deal with 3 or 4 parking spaces, but it's a big nut to crack in some places for people to do that, and may not make it happen. And so I would prefer that we cut it in half, down to 4,500 to do that. That's my plan. We could do a shifting one if somebody wants that, but right now, this thing 9,000 is too high.
We can revisit this at any time, correct?
That's why we took it out of the ordinance.
Yeah, so that was the resolution, okay. So if we find that this is not for us, we can make a change.
I did have a question about some of the text in the resolution. The second whereas, should it be VC within the parentheses instead of VR?
Oh, yes, thank you.
And the next whereas,
Yep, I see it.
should village residential be stricken? Since this is option is only available currently in village commercial.
Yep.
And that's what my intent for the resolution was.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table from Michelle, second by Knight, to adopt the resolution on page 143 and 144 with $9,000 under the now therefore be resolved number 1.
Is there a feeling that, amongst anybody else, that's too high?
Yeah, I think $9,000, but it's happened twice in 15 years too.
Well, and we have the opportunity to take it up at any meeting. So we don't have to do a public hearing, it's just a resolution. So in the midst of the plan review from Planning Commission, we can get this done quicker than it gets through Planning Commission. I guess my concern is that the way the ordinance is written now, you're not required to put the parking on your lot if you don't want to. So if you had to have 10 parking spaces, you can just say, I prefer to put money into the pot.
Right.
And so every man, woman, and child is subsidizing them to not putting something that they could have put. And that's kind of concerning for me.
But most businesses know that they need a certain amount of parking. I mean, they're not gonna just leave it to us to,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, if they're really trying to draw, they're not gonna give up, they would want the spaces. I mean, because there's no, even if, I mean, they could pay into this fund and it could sit there for 100 years.
Correct.
There's no requirement that because we have it, that we spend it on anything, even in the vicinity of where, we don't even have the requirement that we spend it in the vicinity of the spot.
And that makes no sense to me at all.
So I hear what you're saying, they could
Yeah.
say, yeah, it's cheaper not to put the parking there, but they're probably, what is it, cutting off their nose to spite their face relative to their business plan.
Right.
Well, I would say in the future, we're likely to get a more sophisticated version of this where we do have it within an area. And if the development continues south of Main at the pace it's been going, we're probably gonna have a parking garage structure sooner than later. And parking spaces and garages are $40,000 to $80,000 a spot. So this would have to get more complex, and we'd have to figure out, you get 10 spaces and everyone has to have a pass. So, as I mentioned before, the minutes from 1944, we were talking about parking problems. And sidewalks, they were talking about sidewalks in that same meeting too, so.
The cars are just coming in, becoming a big thing and they will be afforded. And now we're in a situation where autonomous vehicles could be something that we see in the next 5 years. I think it's just an amazing irony.
Maybe we'll outlaw them in Dexter.
What, autonomous vehicles?
I don't understand how
I'm just
autonomous
kidding.
vehicles are gonna work when you pull into a, like you can't, into a garage, through the story thing, and you gotta spend the money to put it in and take it out, but somehow
Oh, it's
that's
gonna
not
circle
work,
the
I
block
guess.
waiting for you.
Yeah, it's just gonna go home while you're working.
I got it, but I don't know if I'll live to see the day, so I'm not gonna worry about it.
Okay, so motion on the table is for 9,000. You wanna call the vote?
Fisher?
Yes.
Smith?
No.
Cousins?
No.
Knight? Yes. Michelle's?
Yes.
Tell?
Yes.
Keo?
No. So that passes 4-3. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
As long as we can pull it up at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
No, hey, it's done. All right, so, the last new business item?
I move we approve the, proposed 2017, 2018 budget amendments.
Sorry.
As
By Fisher.
provided.
Second by Smith.
That works.
Anything we need to know or change since the last one,
No,
or since it was in the packet?
no, this will be fine for now. Nothing really needs to be addressed now.
Questions? Okay, please call the vote.
Smith?
Yes.
Tell?
Yes.
Cousins?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Knight?
Yes.
Michelle's?
Yes.
Keo?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Council comments this evening, starting with Mr. Cousins. Oh, wait, where'd you go? All right, you didn't.
I don't know if you know that your former councilperson, Mr. Carson, had a little incident, but he's doing okay. Thought he was having a heart attack. It was just gastritis, so he's okay. He's fine, but he's gonna miss the wave meeting that we were going to go together to and have breakfast together afterwards. But he's okay. This was a scare. My wife had it about 9 months ago, same thing.
Is he thinking of moving down south?
No.
Okay.
Okay, well, tell him hello if you talk to him.
Yeah, well,
Good.
I have to report back to me.
Mr. Tell.
Nothing.
Ms. Fisher.
Yes, kids went to a beer tasting with another couple recently at Mount Pleasant in the field house, and my daughter came back pretty puffed up and proud because she could say she was from Dexter and Jolly Pumpkin. So she, yeah, it was kind of neat, yeah. Oh,
Where you are, you
yeah, she was milking it.
Good.
Ms. Jones, anything to comment on?
Okay,
Or
back to
questions on
historic.
that?
Yeah, she's older, she can tell that.
Yeah, I am. Hang on, there's a young there up there. The clock actually was moved, and it was originally placed across the street, and when Bruce bought that clock for Dexter. And I don't have exact, it was, like dedicated 1990s or something like that. But when the two streets came, thank goodness they moved it. We'd probably be picking up clocks all the time, making the turns. It was decided because we need more of a plaza across the way, it would look nicer, so. Yeah. So there's your history lesson for the night.
Thank you, that was related to the agenda, I appreciate it.
I waited for this
Yeah,
time.
you did well. You did well. Mr. Smith.
I just want to say thank you for posting the item about the Comcast
Oh.
store. Appreciate it.
Ms. Knight.
I have nothing, thank you.
It's kind of fun, we had a couple of non-unanimous votes. It's democracy in action, kind of fun.
Really?
I was at Michigan Municipal League Infrastructure and Transportation Infrastructure Legislative Committee this last Friday. I'm going to do a quick version of some of the bills going through and the position MML took that could affect us. There's a bill in place to allow for motorcycle processions similar to funeral processions. We didn't take any support for or against that. There's this thing for golf carts on state trunk lines with really specific situations is written for one town where weird things happen, so that's not really going to affect us. Yes, for golf carts. There's a bill that modifies requirement for spending on non-motorized. So the current state law says 1%, at least 1% of the money you spend on transportation in your jurisdiction has to go to non-motorized.
Right.
For us, as a city, that's absolutely not a problem because sidewalks, paths, all that stuff count towards it. We oppose that because we think it's important to include that in the mix for transportation. A lot of the more rural road commissions opposed it, but our concern was you're doing this nice stuff in town, you want it to be able to connect to something, so we oppose that. We can now, well, a bill would allow for electric patrol vehicles on sidewalks, so if you've got a cop on the Segway, that would be something that could be done now, which would be pretty fun to see. We opposed a number of bills that we're very much in favor of telecommunication companies paying really small or no fines or not doing preparation work on right-of-way. Let's see, power-driven mobility devices would be considered as pedestrians right now. If you've got a little Amigo, Michigan Motor Code doesn't actually allow you to take that on the sidewalk, which seems to be kind of a hole in there. The current legislation, though, proposed legislation doesn't have a speed limit, so in theory, as it's written, you could have a 60-mile-per-hour mobility device on the sidewalk. Let's see, gave support for a bill that would allow a little bit more flexibility in setting speed limits. So now on certain streets, it's supposed to be 85th percentile speed. The proposed language would allow you to look at local conditions and set it between the 50th and 85th. So that's a nice thing for local stuff. And we took really strong opposition to one from, sponsored by Senator Hoon, that would basically allow small cell wireless folks doing pretty much whatever they want within the right-of-way, putting these devices on poles, putting large poles wherever they want. Even if we've got the infrastructure buried downtown, they would have the right, like $20 to put a giant pole to put this thing in the middle of the right-of-way. It's a, well,
we are local.
This bill was written by telecoms, and they dropped it off. And it reads horrible. I've got it printed off. There are loopholes and weird things that it doesn't make any sense, so.
Did Joe read it?
I cannot comment on that. So we're the Michigan Municipal League is opposing that. They're working with all sorts of other groups, and they've contracted some smart folks from Colorado who have had experience fighting this to come in. So it would be really, really bad news. And with that, I'm done.
Thanks for the update on those.
Anything about net neutrality?
Not here, no.
Is there not arranged participation? Seeing none, I will seek a motion to adjourn. So moved. Moved by Smith. By Cousins, I think I heard, or Knight. All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.